Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you the top 5 books that I read this winter. So the way this video will be structured is that I will kind of go over all the books that I've read over December, January, and February. And then at the end of the video, I'll go into detail about those that made my top 5. So without further ado, let's get started. So starting out with December, I first read A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. The Lost Sisters by Holly Black, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Galatea by Madeline, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna, Clarke, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. We've Solved Murders by Richard Osman, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, Heartbreak is the National Anthem by Sheffield, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. So starting out with January, the only book that I read this month was The Secret War of Julia Child by Diana R. Chambers, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, moving on to February, I then read The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I read Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawlette, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So first up, I have the short story Galatea, I think that's how you say it, by Madeline. This one I just picked up on a whim because I was looking for short books to read at the end of the year, just to kind of meet my 50 books per year goal. And this one really took me by surprise. It is fairly short. I will do the page count somewhere on the screen here, but it is fairly short, but it really packed a punch. It takes place in ancient Greece, following this woman who was originally carved out of marble, and a Greek god came and kind of granted the sculptor a wish, basically, and so she was turned into the ideal woman, but he's quite abusive, so she ends up kind of waking up in like a mental hospital, and it kind of goes from there. This one, even though it was short, it really packed a punch. It had a lot of themes that are still really relevant today, and it was just really interesting to see just how a lot of the systemic issues that we have in terms of how women are treated within society, or they're, crazy, all these things kind of all can date back to even the early days of humans. So I thought this one was really interesting. If you're looking for a quick short story to read and to check off another one on your TBR, I highly recommend you check this one out, and I definitely want to check out more of this author's work as well. Next up, I have We Solved Murders by Richard Osman. This one I really enjoyed. It was definitely a lot of fun to read. Basically, the premise of the story is that we follow this kind of personal, high-end bodyguard who is hired to basically make sure that this author, who had kind of a very public threat, to make sure nothing bad happens to her. So while she's on this remote island owned by this kind of world-renowned author, there are these string of events taking place and murders that make it seem like our kind of bodyguard person is the one behind it. So she kind of has to unravel what is going on in her, what is going on, and she ends up recruiting the help of not only the kind of eccentric author, but also her father-in-law, who is a kind of former Met police or Met detective, and he's kind of very much scared about the world now. And as always, if you're a friend, or if you know of his previous work, The Thursday Murder Club, this one is kind of similar, where he integrates a lot of humor and banter between the characters. I think his characterization and the interactions he has with the characters is definitely a lot of fun, and this one had it as well. So it was kind of a new series of his that I really enjoyed, and it definitely was a fun way to kind of end off my reading for 2024. Next, I have The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. This is the kind of next duology in her overarching vampire series, and this one follows Misha after the events of the first book. But because this is essentially kind of a continuation of the first duology, I won't go too much about the plot in this one because I don't want to spoil anything, but this one was a lot of fun. I really think the book tackled, even though it was kind of very similar in terms of themes, in terms of being kind of trials that the characters have to go through, even though that was kind of very similar, I did feel like the book did tackle a lot of interesting themes in terms of self-love, how if you are first in an abusive relationship with someone, that's the kind of the only love that you kind of know, and how that's you kind of always expect that kind of abuse of power within a relationship, in future relationships and how that can really define that, and how do you kind of break those, you know, cycles or that thinking, which I thought was really well done. I really enjoyed that part, and I'm just looking at my notes here, and the ending of this one was really, you know, fun and spectacular. I did feel like there were some pacing issues, but I feel like the last 50 pages was so explosive that it really made up for kind of the you know, pacing problems from parts that were really slow. So I really love the ending. Similar to the first book in the original duology, the ending was very explosive and it ended on such a big cliffhanger that I'm really excited to see what happens next. Luckily, I think the final book in the duology comes out in like August or something, so I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for that one, and I can't wait to dive right in. So this one, it's not my, you know, the best fantasy series that I ever read, but they're really fun and they kind of deal with a lot of tropes that I do enjoy. So I think you're a fan of ACOTAR, I think you would like this series. Don't go expecting to be like your mind to be blown, but it's still really a lot of fun. Next I have When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. This is the highest rated Bridgerton book that I've read so far. I've been kind of slowly working my way through the Bridgerton series just because I am in love with the TV show, and this is the only one I think so far that I think I'm like, oh, I hope like this is one that I was like, okay, I think it's on par with how much I enjoy the TV show. I think the TV show in most of the cases has been a lot better than the books in this case, and I'm really excited to see how the show tackles this one. But this is Francesca's story. I don't want to spoil too much because I feel like if you're on the internet, I think you know kind of what happens, but this one I felt was, you know, it dealt with some, you know, good subject matter, or like, you know, more, not good subject matter, but more real world subject matter, like miscarriages, infertility, death of a, you know, spouse, those type of things, and kind of grief. And I thought that was handled well. I didn't feel like the relationships, especially after Eloise's, I was so disappointed because Eloise is my favorite character in the TV show and her book was just terrible. So I'm happy to see that the love interest didn't have too many red flags. But overall, like I said, I really enjoyed this. I read through this one fairly quickly as well, and I think it's, of the books so far, this one is my favorite. So I'm very excited to see how it transfers onto the screen, because I know they made Francesca's love interest a girl, which I think is amazing. So I'm very interested to see how they will tackle that in future seasons, which is really exciting. But like I said, overall this one was my favorite of the Bridgerton books so far. And lastly, I have Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett, and this one I did not realize it was the final book in this like trilogy. I didn't realize it was going to be a trilogy until after I read it, which was a little bit disappointing. But the premise of this series is that we follow Emily Wilde, who is kind of a professor in, you know, the folk and fae, and then in the first book she is trying to finish her encyclopedia of, you know, folk creatures, and so she goes to this kind of remote wintry landscape, and her colleague ends up joining along, who she doesn't really like, and it kind of goes off from there. This one, like I said, because it's the last one, I won't, you know, talk too much about the plot points in this one, but I really enjoyed this one. I felt like it was having not known it was the final book in the series, I did feel like it was a good conclusion of the series, but I think it did leave room for maybe more books in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But I feel like this one is, if you think you're a fan, if you grew up reading like Spiderwick as a kid and you like kind of Holly Black's fae in terms of like the Crow Prince, where they kind of have teeth, they're gross looking, I think this is like the perfect book for you. It's kind of, I think it kind of skews a little bit kind of cozy fantasy, but I do feel like the world is developed. There's a lot of really integral plot points that are played out, and I really like this. My only kind of complaint with this one is that some of like the problems were solved a little bit too quickly, and kind of there was this build up and it was kind of resolved within like 20 or 30 pages, so I felt like it was just wrapped up a little bit too quickly. But I really love to see kind of the growth of these characters and kind of the new setting of this one as well. So I'm very sad that this trilogy is over, but hopefully, like I said, it was a little bit of an open ending, so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we do get, you know, kind of spin-off series in the future. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you've read kind of over the winter season, which ones really stood out to you. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.